Ambassador Ramdin, how important would you say are these climate change negotiations for the Caribbean region?
For the Caribbean region, but including when you speak about the Caribbean region, I have to make a distinction between the two groups in it, the Caribbean islands, but also the low-lying coastal areas, which come from Belize, Guyana, and Suriname.
Yes.
They both have similar impact, but there are some differences. These talks are critically important, simply because we are looking at a global framework that is going to be hopefully binding, that will be having high aspirational levels of commitment. These commitments, both at national level but also at the regional level, are important because it will determine how our countries will have to start dealing with the impact of climate change, which already is happening. But what they need to do domestically to put in place institutional capacity, increase the level of technical understanding and capacity to deal with them, but also to address the financial issues accompanying these activities. So while these talks here are at the global level, for the region, in my view, three things are important. One is we need to communicate better with the people, with our population, the impact of climate change. It cannot be a issue of that it's distant from their life. It has to be conveyed that this is about their life and their future. So communication at the national level is critically important. Two is the issue of financing. There's a lot of impact. A lot of activities need to be undertaken. Projects, building dikes, building mangrove to protect coastal areas and so on. They call them mitigation and adaptation policies. So we need to take a good look at how we organize ourselves within our economies in the context of climate change impacts. Going to a green economy, making sure that our industries are much cleaner in their production, do not emit enough or high levels of carbon dioxide and so on. But this all will cost money. Our small island communities and the low-lying coastal areas do not have those resources. And our impact on the global emission is pretty marginal. So we are basically being affected by something which is not caused principally by the island states. So what we need to do at this conference is to build alliances, to talk to those who have the resources to help us mitigate and adapt to climate change. And I think this is one of the critical issues that needs to be conveyed here. All the technical studies are great and important. All the discussions about how bad it is for us is also great and important. But just acknowledging it is just a symbolism for me. We need to put really money to the cause now. And we have to force as much as we can by building coalitions with other island states and other low-lying coastal areas, coalitions to make the richer countries understand that this cannot be done alone by the small countries, and that it is in their benefit to invest in mitigation policies in these countries. The other issue that is critically important is we have to organize ourselves at home, institutionally, building capacity. Accessing the funds is a job on its own. It's very complex. I have in fact promoted the idea that the small island states and the low-lying coastal areas, which are not producing so much of carbon dioxide, should be assisted in getting them ready to deal with this issue at a national level. And for that, special preferential resources should be made available. So building capacity, building an institutional framework, having this public outreach and education must be part of that process. And it is something which is going to be for the long term. So when politicians commit to climate change impact mitigation and adaptation, they have to understand that it's not for a 5-year. This is about many governments ahead. So we all, opposition, coalition in parliament, should discuss this issue very much in detail. So I think that is our role here. It's a very big issue at a global level, high interest, India, China, in the middle of balancing growth and protecting the environment. It is almost a legitimate argument they're making that others had their time, why not us now? But we have to look at it much more in a holistic perspective that we cannot continue the way things have been done.
But I ask you to comment on the importance of climate change for Suriname in particular.
Well, Suriname has, as a low-lying coastal areas, we have done a great job in Suriname. Almost 80% of our country is forested. We have a very low level of deforestation, less than 1%. We are involved in sustainable logging, and we are in the top 10 of that. We have water resources as a country in the top 10. So we have protected our natural resources pretty good. But that is not enough, because the impact comes from outside. So we see sea level rise impacting the coastal area. The coastal area which is not protected properly, we don't have the money to build high dikes and dams and so on. The water management, the inundation of salt water far much into the interior of Suriname will have impact on the agricultural capacity. So for us there are very real dangers. On top of that, almost 90% of our population lives in that coastal area, which with 1 meter sea level rise, it would mean that we'll have to move the capital, all the urban areas into the hinterland of Suriname. That will be enormous cost. So the government of Suriname is already preparing for adaptation policies, is committed to do so. It's one of the key priorities President Bouterse stated in his recent address to Parliament. So there are very concrete issues about agriculture, arable land, about food security, about losing land, about the inundation of salt water, and all of that, and we need to take care of that. So for us it's a real issue, and there is the political commitment. But again, it doesn't need to stop, it should not stop there. Political commitment is one, but it's about putting that into action. And that's what we're doing here.
And for all of the Caribbean, after COP21, what is the next step?
I think the most important thing will be for the Caribbean, under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister of St. Lucia, is to have very quickly, I would say in January next year already, a meeting of Ministers of Environment with all kinds of other stakeholders, the private sector, NGOs, the academia, the specialized organs like the 5 Cs, to sit down and say, okay, let's see what happened in Paris. Let's evaluate, let's make up the balance and take it from there. I think that's the first thing that needs to be done. You know, one of the weaknesses we all have in our country, due to so many issues, is follow-up. So we have to come up with that evaluation and build on that a strategy for the Caribbean as a whole, diversified in terms of what is relevant to some countries and relevant to others, but have one complete strategy, coherent strategy within the Caribbean. I think that will be required as the first thing. I can say for Suriname that 1 week after this COP is over in Suriname, we will meet with all stakeholders, all ministers relevant to this issue, and talk about the outcome and say, what do we take away from it? How do we respond to it now?
Thank you.
Good?